really appreciate this question about Jungian archetypes because I appreciate archetypes and I appreciate Carl Jung, partly because I happen to share a birthday with him, along with Aldous Huxley and James Lovelock and George Bernard Shaw, among other people whom I admire. Just a little side note, there is an E in archetypes, Archetypes. It's probably just a typo. Anyway, let's get into it. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychologist who was actually a student of Freud. They had a sort of uneasy relationship and a falling out towards the end of Freud's life. Freud was the one who actually developed the idea of the unconscious, and Jung came along and popularized the idea and fleshed it out, partly using this idea of archetypes. So the word archetype comes from the root word archai, which is a Greek word meaning something like first principles. It's a bit of a Platonic idea. Plato famously believed that this immanent world of forms was informed by a transcendent world where archetypes resided. So everything was a sort of reflection of some transcendent reality. So for example, the goddess Aphrodite or Venus was the archetype of beauty, and that everything that was beautiful partook in some way of that archetype. Another example of an archetype is the archetype of, say, the human form. With apologies to those who not conform to this form, but 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, bilaterally symmetrical, and so forth. Most commonly, archetypes show up in mythology and in popular mythology, like books and movies. So that's where you'll find archetypes like the hero, who shows up in almost every movie, or the heroine, and they go on a hero's journey or heroine's journey. That is also archetypal. It's repeated over and over, and they often encounter somebody like the wise old person who gives them wisdom on their journey, or the trickster who tries to fool them, or of course the villain. That's an archetype as well. So just taking like Star Wars for an example, an epic film, Luke Skywalker is the hero, the wise person is Obi-Wan Kenobi, then you have fools like R2-D2 and C-3PO, Darth Vader is the villain, the archetypal maiden in distress, Princess Leia. Archetypes also show up very strongly in the Tarot, especially in the major arcana. There you will see like the Fool and the Magician and the Empress and so on, all the way through the first part of the deck. Archetypes also show up very famously in astrology. So each of the 10 planets in astrology is associated with it like an archetypal energy or an archetypal force, and sometimes even an archetypal figure. So one example I can give, partly because I'm wearing this shirt, is Pluto. So Pluto is a Greek god who's associated with the underworld. So in astrology, Pluto is associated with the underworld, with Hades, with deep dark energies, with the occult energies, with hidden things, with sex and all things that are taboo, with death and rebirth, transformation, volcanic energy, natural energy, things like this. Turns out there's even an entire branch or form of astrology called archetypal astrology that deals almost exclusively with the 10 planetary archetypes and their relationships or aspects, and not so much with the signs and the houses and so forth. Full disclosure, I studied with one of the founders of archetypal astrology. His name is Richard Tarnas. He wrote a book called Cosmos and Psyche that I would recommend, but I find great value in the archetypal astrology. Whether or not it is true, it has a lot of psychological value to me. So yeah, the guy who is the New Age skeptic and critical thinker is kind of into archetypal astrology. There you go.